What if?
Let me assert my firm belief
What if
that the only thing we have to fear is
we looked at things
fear itself.
differently?
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Differently. Differently? Differently. Hey friends, it's Heather, and you're listening to That's Life, stories and lessons that might make you think differently. Thanks for joining part 2 of the series titled Should I Stay or Should I Go? If you have not already listened to part 1, I would encourage you to do so. It was such rich conversation. Just to give you some background, I have invited two of my closest friends, Krystal and Delaney, to participate in this conversation around stay-at-home parenting and the decision to stay at home with your kids, return to work. Do you do a part-time? Do you have a flexible work environment? And these are decisions that we face, and for some, they're really trying to decide at their time in their life, do I even want to have kids right now? Because maybe, my career is just really taking off, and I don't want that for myself right now. So in the first episode at the series, we talked about things like shifting your expectations around what on both sides, shifting your expectations around your career, also shifting your expectations around parenting and what that looks like, or I guess I want to even say what that has to look like, where we're trying to get rid of should in our vocabulary actually. And so thinking about, okay, well, this is how my friends do it, or this is how my mom did it, or something like that. And instead thinking, okay, what works for me, what works for my significant other, if there is one, and finding that good balance for yourself. We also talked about accepting the season you're in. So important. Krystal really doubled down on this many times, accepting that season that you're in, but also recognizing that it's a season. It's not forever. And so there is, or there can be a stigma associated with stay-at-home parenting. And for some, they think that, that's it, and might develop some resentment or jealousy towards their significant other, or jealousy towards friends or whatever else, thinking, well, I'm at home. I don't get to go out and have these conversations, or I don't, I'm not in the workforce, or I'm not using my degree, or something along those lines. But really just taking a step back and saying, okay, I'm not right now, but that doesn't mean that I never will. And then finally, also, really talking about that conversation. What literally does that conversation look like when you sit down with your significant other to say, what are we going to do? What makes sense for us? What makes sense for our unit here? And I think that, sometimes that can be a really difficult conversation. It's one that needs to be had because there's nothing that should be implied, but it's a difficult conversation to sit down and have. So anyway, those were just some of the things we talked about in part 1. Really encourage you to go back and tune in, and we're gonna kick off again here into part 2. So enjoy. All right, let's get back into this. So Krystal, just sticking on you for a moment because you work from home. Talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages, and remember the rule of thumb about unapologetically being truthful. And I know, like, the obvious advantage is being that I'm assuming anyway, maybe you're going to disagree with me, but I would assume that the obvious advantage is that you actually get to be there with your kids, to send them off to school when they come home. And of course, like, they're in school now, but when they were home, like you got to be there with them. But just kind of talk about, what you like, what you don't like about working out of the home.
Okay. Um, yeah, definitely. I think the big one is just being here. Like, I don't have to choose. Well, I don't want to say that I don't have to choose between like work and my kids because, just because I work from home doesn't mean that it's flexible. It's not optional. And
Yeah.
so I do, every now and then there are things that I miss out on, but for the most part, I'm in charge of my time, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to decide when and where I work, how much I work. And honestly, I think the flexibility is one of the greatest blessings for me because it also has allowed me to really pour into my marriage,
Mm-hmm.
to allow Reggie and I to get to, such a great place. And, I do get to do things that other moms might not get to do. And I definitely don't take that for granted. I think it is a huge privilege that I get to do that. And, it is a huge blessing. So I
Yeah.
think that is probably my favorite thing about it is the flexibility and the income. And then I think it is sometimes hard, because you have to be self-motivated and you have to, get yourself to work in your house when you want to, maybe sit and hang out or, do the laundry or do other things. Or, sometimes I've had to really teach people in my life, especially my family, how to respect my work as much as they
Mm-hmm.
would respect me going to an office,
Absolutely. I
you know?
mean, I worked remotely for a number of years and I felt the same thing. I mean, it was such a blessing because I felt like I was the queen of multitasking, because it was like I could have laundry in and doing different things because I was at home, or just, even the flexibility of like, okay, I can wake up and work out and still catch a 7 a.m. Conference call,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
but at the same time, you're right. You have to set those boundaries because you're like, hey, hold up. Like, no, I can't just go shopping in the middle of the day, or no, I can't just like take
Right.
time off to go do you a favor, run you an errand or something, like I still have to be
Right.
working.
Yeah.
So
See,
Yeah,
that
I
would
get
be
that.
definitely.
my demise. I would never see. I don't think I could ever work from home because that would be
Yeah.
my that would be my demise. Is
Yeah.
I would
Well, honestly,
suck at
I
doing at separating.
Yeah.
yeah, honestly, and Heather, I think that there are people that are great at multitasking, like you were saying, you were able to do all that. But for me, I've actually had to teach myself how to not multitask.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I found that for me, multitasking is not a strength. And so for me, like, I do a block schedule system. And so, when it's my work block, I'm working. And that
Mm-hmm.
means, you know, my kids have quiet time and they color, they might watch a little bit of TV, they, whatever. Um, and, my husband obviously respects what I do. So he's very good about like, these are your work hours, and we have agreed that this is when I work, this is when I'm mom, this is when I'm wife,
Mm-hmm.
because, and it's been fun because I actually have learned like, when he comes home, I can be like, you know what, I wifed and mommed like a boss today. And then there's other days where I'm like, you know what, I killed my 31 business today. But
Yeah.
doing all the things, I feel like trying to do all of them at once doesn't work for me.
You don't do any of them well. And that's, I mean, like,
Right.
I should definitely clarify and say that that was when I was talking about being like the queen of multitasking, that was a few years ago. And since, again, these are the things you learn with age, I guess, is that in the past couple of years, and maybe through the yoga practice as well, I have learned what it means to be in deep focus on one thing at a time
Mhm.
and be fully present. And so one of the things that I have actually been doing more of lately is, instead of putting, how like on resumes or on professional profiles, we have a tendency to put, good at multitasking or something like that. And instead, I've been talking to people and saying like, no, I'm really good at focusing on one thing. And that means like I am giving you my undivided attention, or this activity, my undivided attention, which means that you get all of me, which means I'm pouring into it and it is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
So
No.
I'm just trying to do more of that. So I'm with you on that. I mean, so with with staying at home, and you didn't you didn't touch on this at all, but I'm just curious, I want to hear from both of you. About this idea of like child favoritism, or I guess it would be more like parent favoritism. So in some other conversations, I've just been hearing that when a parent either stays at home, or I guess it's just that maybe the children are around one parent more than the other, that there have been some concerns that maybe the kids don't listen as well to the other parent, or maybe that they're not really forming that close relationship with the other parent. And I'm just curious if either of you have experienced this, or if you've ever been in fear of this happening.
Oh, I think I'm definitely in fear of it happening.
You're in fear of like
And I
of
think
the kids preferring Dan or listening to Dan more over you.
I think that they listen, and Pax is so young.
Yeah.
So he is pretty good. And I think Parker, I think she has her days. But I definitely think at times she does prefer me for like mommy stuff. I think I'm her mommy. And so I think I feel different things for her than maybe Dan does. But I do, it does make me very nervous, because I often hear, like, oh, daddy's girls. And so I do like a sweat and get like a ball in my throat thinking about when that pendulum does swing.
Right.
And she, and she definitely goes to Dan for specific things, at times as well. And so, yeah.
Do you think that she spends more time with you than Dan?
Yes.
Okay.
I think she does, and I think she did when she was littler, because I was part-time, and so it was her and I, the majority of the day, things like that. She was with Dan's parents in the morning and stuff like that, or when I went to work, but then I picked her up at noon, and then she was with me. So yeah, I think she did spend more time with me. And I think Pax now, because I was home with him last year part-time and going back to work full-time this year. But I think, and he's still just such a baby, but he definitely, I guess it's more, I think they come to each of us for different needs.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I definitely am not, I'm not going to hide it and say that I want to be the favorite parent.
Well, I think I think that would be everyone's
not be.
preference. But I also think, I don't want to out her or anything, but I do have a good friend who is in legitimate fear of this, because she's at home all day with the kids. Like, she is full on stay at home mom. Doesn't work outside of the home or in the home. And she's really concerned, because it's like the kids will not even listen to the father at all. And just are really not having that relationship. And I just feel for her. And I don't know if any of the listeners are experiencing that, or know someone who's experiencing that, but it just seems like it would be a very sad thing. And it's kind of like, what do you do? What do you do in that moment? How do you kind of force your kids to start forming that relationship, especially if you're thinking about, well, dad's at work, or, you know what I mean? Like,
can I just say, and I'm going to say this is just like for us, and I don't mean any disrespect to anybody that, like your friend situation, but what I feel, what I've found is that it's not so much to do with who works and if you work from home or out of the home or whatever, as much as it is the time that you do spend with your kids and what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Like
That's what I
feel
was
like,
just gonna say. I think that people need to, if you're not in the home as much, you need to have dedicated quality time when you are with them.
even with me home, I still am very intentional. When Reggie works, for example, Gentry
Right.
and I spend time together, just her and I, when the other kids go to bed. And
Mm-hmm.
then, I heard a tip from a lady that I follow that I just love how she does life. She's about to have twins and have 8 kids.
Oh my gosh.
And she's amazing. But she actually, each of her kids gets 15 minutes in her room at bedtime of just one-on-one time with mom and dad. And I think as moms, and maybe even as dads, maybe they think this too, you think that, gosh, if I'm not spending, X amount of hours with my kid, then I might not form this relationship or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But Delaney, I've seen you, even though you do work, I feel like you're very intentional with your kids. And when you do have time, like on the weekends, you're always doing special family things, and it's the same for us. I think it's not necessarily a matter of who works when and where. It's more of a matter of intentionality with the
Yeah.
relationship that you have with your kids.
It's not
And
quantity, it's quality, right?
and I agree. And I think
Yeah.
it's important
Yeah.
too, as moms, for us. I mean, because again, I know, like I said, I joke about wanting to be the favorite parent, but I also know when to intentionally step away
Totally.
as a parent, because
Oh,
so that my husband can be in charge. And so I think that it's
Totally.
important for me to, let him handle certain things, and for me to support his decisions, and for me to, have his back
mm-hmm.
at different times intentionally, so that the kids do see, him as just as much of a disciplinarian, or just as much as, whatever role it needs to be, that we definitely share and are united in our roles as parents.
Right.
Totally. And I think that also brings up such a good point about making sure that your kids also see that intentionality in their marriage. Like my kids know that Reggie comes first. Like he's my husband, and in our, I guess hierarchy, he comes first after God, of
Mm-hmm.
course. And I think that is also very important for us, because then my kids know, like, if I go to dad, I'm also going to mom, whether I want to or not, and vice versa. Like they
Right.
they don't get
Like
to
you guys
tell
aren't
me
battling each
something.
other.
Right, totally.
Yeah.
And I think it's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I mean, I love this conversation because I couldn't agree more. Again, that not having children myself, but it is one of those things that I've always believed in, that, you just hear, and again, I don't want to take anything away from anyone, but you hear a lot of times, like, my kids come first, and I was always kind of like that naysayer that was like, yeah, like I'm gonna love my kids unconditionally, no doubt, but
Right.
my relationship with my spouse would always come first, because again, we can only pour into our children if we are good as a unit. So
Totally.
it's not a matter of, that the kids are, I guess, coming first. It's that relationship that you have first, and then the children after that. So Krystal, it's so funny that you said that, because I just recently was talking on this and explaining that same thing. I was like and even did like the stepping ladder with my hands. I was like, it goes God, and
Yeah.
then my relationship, with my significant other, and then it would come children, and I
Right.
was like, boom, boom, boom.
No, and that's important. That's
Yeah.
important, and that's how it has to. I mean, it ultimately it does. It has to be,
Yeah.
in order for it to be.
Yeah.
I think for it to be successful. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And Dan and I work really hard at with each other. Not, and I think they
Maintaining
really
that.
hard, because it
Yeah.
actually comes very, very easy. But when we are our strongest, our family is our strongest.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
You know.
Totally. And I think that the kids feel feel even more love from seeing that example.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
do.
Well, I want to, I know, Krystal, you mentioned before, but I just want to ask you kind of like, very pointedly here. So do you think that you'll ever re-enter like I'm doing air quotes, but a traditional workforce or work setting?
You know what? I honestly, I don't. And I don't think it's because of not being in the workforce. I think it's more of, I don't think that's who I am or who God's calling me to be.
Mm.
I think that, I am not called to be a traditional,
9 to 5er.
yeah, it's just not. Even before I was staying home, I did some outside sales and I felt really fulfilled in that role.
Yeah.
And
You've
I just
always
don't
had
think,
like this very entrepreneurial spirit to you.
yeah. And, I love people. I love being out and about. I don't see myself as that type of person,
Mm-hmm.
Not in respectfully, like I know that some people like they love the, the 9 to 5 and the this is how it is and that kind of thing, and I just don't think God made me that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I guess Delaney, then on your side, do you ever see yourself leaving your job to then stay at home?
Oh God. I don't know. Like, I wish
Mm-hmm.
I could have like sometimes I fantasize about it. Yeah.
I like how you put that.
But I think, again, I think that it would be a big lifestyle change to do
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And so I don't know that I'm comfortable with that, because I am comfortable with the lifestyle that we have built for ourselves and are building for ourselves. And so maybe one day, I'll get to a comfortable place where I can maintain that same lifestyle. But I also do, talking about like having, like Krystal was saying, like, she has this block schedule. For me, it's easier to have a block schedule if I leave and go to work. I do my work when I'm at work, and I leave and I come home, and I have left that hat at the door.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's easier for me. And I found that with, the past 3 years, and only being part-time was a really big struggle for me, because I didn't feel like I was able to apply myself to my career as much as I needed to, and that I suffered and that side, and mentally I suffered in that side. And then because I was suffering there, it made me suffer as a wife, and it made me suffer as a mom as well, because I didn't feel like I could do all of it well, because I felt like I wasn't I wasn't able to, like I said, dedicate the time that I needed. And so I feel like when I do better with that kind of, with this going to work, doing work, and leaving work, and coming home, and being able to focus on being a wife and a mom.
Okay, so you say that, and I'm gonna challenge you just a smidge here, Dee, because so you're a teacher. I think you mentioned that once before, but I just want to reiterate it, is that you're a teacher. And so, I mean, your job is, and just knowing your personality, is that you are you're investing in our youth. And so when you say like you're able to leave your work and leave it at the door and go home, I'm just curious, do you ever feel like your energy really is spent more on other people's kids? Because that's what you do day to day. And then whenever you get home, that you really just don't have anything left, like what you were saying, because it's like you poured everything into these kids, educating them, and really, especially in the programs and with the kids that you work with, that by the time you get home, it's kind of like, I'm done. Do you feel that way?
I mean, some days, but somehow no. I mean, I don't know. First, I mean, right now, no. I feel like I get giddy to go to work, and to do my job, and then I get giddy to go get my kids. I mean, when that at 2:45, when I am packing up and my students are stacking their chairs and stuff like that, like I get giddy to go pick up packs.
Mm-hmm.
I think if if I'm honest. I think that the thing that suffers probably the most is myself. Because, I leave school, I go and I pick up packs. Once a week I pick up Parker, but my husband picks her up and stuff like that. And then we go home, and then it's like, dinner, and we're hanging out and we're playing and we're doing the park and stuff like that. And I think if anything maybe suffers, it's probably, and something where I don't have enough steam is it's probably for myself. Which at times then gets a little bit bogged down, and and then I have to make sure that I'm doing some self-care and things like that. But I think
because otherwise that like compounds up, and then one day you just reach your max and you're like, ah.
Yeah. And so, because, at 9:00 at night, when things finally settle down, kids are in bed and stuff like that, it's like, I'm ready to go to bed. But then it's like, oh, dang.
You're like, yeah, I didn't get any time, but really I'm just exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I go to bed at 9:00 and I don't have any kids. But I require a full 8 hours. That's just me.
See? Yeah.
You're like, that'll all change when you become a mom.
Right. Yes, and it does. And so, yeah, I think that, no, I don't think right now I can say that I feel, I mean, and maybe, I guess I shouldn't say never, because of course, some days are more demanding than others. And then, I do feel like with having a teacher's schedule, I'm very blessed. I have weekends off. I have long holidays. And so that also, I think, is very helpful as well.
Yeah.
Because then I don't have to battle, when am I going to, am I going to work Christmas Eve, or, do I, it's like, I'm very lucky that I get to have a lot of time during those times. And so maybe those vacations and stuff like that come at perfect times too, where I'm just ready. And then I get to pour into my babies, and I get to pour into my husband and my family and stuff like that during those times, and kind of reset and then go back into the next phase of the school year.
Whew. Thanks again for tuning into part 2 of the series. Aren't they just great? I am just enjoying this conversation so much, and I hope that you are also finding the discussion valuable and hopefully able to take some nuggets of information and advice, and think about how it applies in your own life. A couple of things that I've noted down when we were talking about the risk of children choosing favorites or having a preference towards the parent that they see the most, so maybe potentially the one who stays at home, or they spend the most time with. Krystal said this: it's not so much about who works, or whether they're working in the home or out of the home, as much as it is the time you spend with your kids and what that looks like. And I thought that was so good, because again, that really enforces that quality versus quantity. And so if you are the parent who is spending more time with your kids, but fear that your significant other then isn't developing that relationship, this kind of helps with that. And then if you're on the other side of that, if you're the parent who is working out of the home and maybe feel guilty because you're not there for school pickups, or you're not there for mealtime, or maybe sometimes bedtime, and you feel a little bit guilty about that, just remember, it's about the time that you do spend with them, and how you're investing in them and what that looks like. And then Delaney, when we were talking about really having that balance, finding that balance in yourself and what is really going to fulfill you. Delaney talked about there was a time in her life when she was working part-time right after having kids, and that wasn't enough for her, actually. And she found that out because she really felt like she wasn't devoting enough time to her career. So she said, I was suffering in my career, and that made me suffer as a mom and a wife, because I didn't feel like I could do all of it well. I couldn't dedicate the time that was really needed. And I think that that is something that probably all of us can relate to, even if we're not parents, but probably even more so if we are parents, and we're trying to divvy up our time between different areas, and all the meanwhile feeling like I can't do it all very well. But also recognizing that it really is that balancing game, because when we feel like we're not really making ends meet or really pouring into an area of our life, sure, other areas are going to begin to suffer, and we are then in turn going to get down on ourselves a little bit. So anyway, just a really great conversation. I hope that you will join us in a couple weeks for the final part of this series, when we get into the mom guilt, and also some final words of advice from Krystal and Delaney. So thank you so much. Until then, what are you gonna do differently? Because that's life.